The first thing I remembered after dying was the sound of a zipper. Not tires screeching, not people screaming. A zipper. Metal teeth grinding against each other while someone laughed. You can't even open a pencil case without messing it up. Then everything went white. When I opened my eyes again, fluorescent classroom lights buzzed above me. The familiar scent of whiteboard markers and old textbooks settled in my lungs before panic did. My heart slammed against my ribs so violently, I thought I was having another accident. I stared at my hands. Small.
No scars.
No wedding ring. Just ink stains on my fingers from where I doodled equations during math class. Someone flicked the back of my chair. Earth to Mia. I froze. I knew that voice.
Cassie.
Slowly, I turned around. There she was. Brown ponytail. Perfect smile. School blazer pressed so neatly, it looked like she'd just walked out of a uniform catalog.
Alive.
She blinked at me. Seriously? Are you sleeping with your eyes open? Around us, students chatted while our math teacher wrote geometry problems across the board. Room B214. Year 11. 3 weeks before everything started falling apart. I had gone back. Not by months. By 12 years. Every instinct screamed that this couldn't be real, yet every detail was exactly right. The tiny crack in the classroom window. The faded motivational poster peeling from the corner. Even the squeaky ceiling fan that never got repaired. I remembered all of it, because this was where she chose me, where she realized I was useful, where she started ruining my life. The teacher clapped once. Everyone, take out your geometry sets. The class erupted into the familiar scraping of chairs and backpacks unzipping. Without thinking, my hand shot into my school bag. My fingers wrapped around the same blue plastic protractor case I'd carried every day. Only this time, I didn't take it out. Instead, I closed my hand around it.
Locked.
Safe. Untouched. A strange warmth spread through my chest. In my first life, I'd handed that case to Cassie without a second thought. It seemed so small.
So meaningless.
But that stupid plastic case had started everything. Inside wasn't just my geometry equipment. Hidden beneath the removable tray was a flash drive my older brother had asked me to keep for him after his laptop broke. He said it contained backups of a scholarship project. I never looked. I never needed to. Until Cassie convinced me to force the zipper because it was only stuck. The flash drive snapped in half. My brother lost months of work. He missed the scholarship. Dropped out. Spent years blaming himself. I spent years blaming me. And Cassie? She laughed about it. I didn't know there was anything important inside. She always knew. She always somehow knew exactly where to push.
Mia.
The teacher looked directly at me. Geometry tools? I nodded quickly. Yes, miss. I placed the entire case carefully on my desk. Still locked.
Still closed.
Cassie leaned over immediately. Oh, good. Mine's missing the compass again.
Of course it was.
It wasn't. She had hidden it herself. I remembered that too. She always created little emergencies that required someone else's help. Can I borrow yours?
No.
The word came out before I could soften it. She stared. So, after class?
No.
Her smile twitched. Why? I need them. You don't need all of them.
Ido.
She laughed awkwardly, looking around as if expecting someone else to join in. Nobody did. Something had changed.
Not them. Me.
For the first time, I wasn't rushing to rescue her. The teacher began explaining angle bisectors while I copied notes with steady hands. Every few minutes, I checked that the protractor case was still beside me.
Still closed.
Still mine. At lunch, I skipped the cafeteria. In my previous life, this was where Cassie would sit beside me and casually ask to borrow my notes. Then my calculator. Then my locker. Then my trust. Instead, I climbed the empty staircase leading to the old science building rooftop. Students weren't supposed to be there. Neither was I. I sat against the warm concrete wall and finally let myself cry. Not because I'd gone back. Because I finally understood something I'd spent years refusing to admit. Cassie had never been my friend. She had been studying me. Every kindness she'd shown had been an investment. Every compliment had bought another piece of my confidence. Every favor had become another chain. I wiped my face before anyone could see. Footsteps echoed behind me. I stiffened. Please don't be.
Mia.
Not Cassie. My older brother.
Ethan.
He was carrying 2 juice boxes because he always bought one for me.
Ide furbuten. No.
I'd remembered too late. You skipped lunch. I wasn't hungry. He frowned. You okay? I almost hugged him hard enough to knock both of us over. Instead, I took the juice box with shaking hands.
I've fine.
You've been crying. I just had a weird dream. He smiled. One of those forgot the exam dreams? If only.
He sat beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke.
Then I reached into my backpack. I've still got your flash drive. He looked surprised. I wasn't going to ask for it until next week. I know. You remembered? I remember everything. He laughed, assuming I meant the deadline. I handed him the unopened protractor case. Take it now. You sure?
Please.
He unzipped the outer pocket instead of opening the geometry case. Inside, beneath the removable tray exactly where I'd hidden it years ago, rested the small black flash drive. Untouched. His eyebrows rose. You've been guarding this like treasure. I guess I have. He slipped it safely into his pocket. Thanks. A weight lifted from my chest so suddenly, I nearly laughed. One tragedy had already disappeared. One. Maybe that was enough. Maybe changing one choice really could change everything. Unfortunately, someone had been watching. Cassie stood in the doorway, leading to the rooftop. Her smile hadn't disappeared. It had simply become thinner. Sharper. I've been looking everywhere for you, she said. Neither Ethan nor I answered immediately. She glanced at him before looking back at me. So that's why you wouldn't lend me your case. Something in her tone made my skin crawl. It wasn't annoyance. It was calculation. She had expected something to happen. Something hadn't. And now she was trying to figure out why. Ethan stood. I've got class. He waved before disappearing downstairs. Cassie waited until he was gone. Then she walked over and sat beside me as though nothing unusual had happened. You've been acting really weird today. Have I? Yeah. She smiled again. The old Mia would have helped. I looked straight into her eyes. The old Mia died. She laughed. What? I smiled back. Nothing. For a brief second, only a heartbeat, something unreadable crossed her face. Not confusion. Recognition. As if she suddenly realized the rules of a game had changed without anyone telling her. And for the first time in either of my lives, Cassie looked uncertain. I intended to keep it that way. The next morning, I did something that would have horrified the old version of me. I arrived at school 40 minutes early. Not because I suddenly loved mornings. Because I remembered. Memory had become both a gift and a curse. It wasn't perfect. Not every conversation replayed word for word, but moments that had changed the course of my life stood out with painful clarity. They came back like photographs tucked inside an old book. Some were faded around the edges. Others were painfully sharp. Today was one of those days. By lunch, someone would accuse me of stealing a compass. It sounded ridiculous now. Back then, it had been the first time I experienced how quickly people believed a confident lie over a quiet truth. I walked straight to my locker. Still dented near the bottom. Still sticking unless I lifted the handle before turning it. I smiled bitterly. Some things never changed. I placed my backpack inside and reached into my blazer pocket. The tiny silver key rested against my fingertips. Last time, I'd left it hanging from the zipper of my school bag because it was more convenient. Cassie had borrowed it. For 5 minutes. 5 minutes was all she needed. I hadn't realized she'd made a copy until months later. Not this time. The key disappeared into the hidden pocket I'd sewn into the lining of my blazer years after graduation. Funny how skills developed from trauma became useful. You came early. I turned. Mr. Lawson, our mathematics teacher. He looked exactly the same. Coffee in one hand, a stack of worksheets threatening to spill from the other. I couldn't sleep, I answered. Exam nerves already? I almost laughed. If only exams had been my biggest problem. A little. He nodded sympathetically before disappearing into the staff room. Simple. Normal. Ordinary. It struck me how peaceful life actually had been before Cassie started rearranging it piece by piece. She never destroyed everything at once. She nudged.
Suggested.
Encouraged. She let other people do the judging. That was what made her dangerous. She almost never looked guilty. By recess, the classroom buzzed with chatter as everyone compared homework. I stayed in my seat, notebook open, head down, watching. The old me had always believed kindness attracted kindness. The new me watched patterns. Cassie entered 6 minutes after the bell.
Late.
Perfectly composed. She apologized to the teacher with that practiced smile she'd spent years refining. I missed the bus. She hadn't. Her father drove her every morning. I knew because I'd been in that car dozens of times. She sat beside me. Still mad. I'm not mad. You seem mad. I'm busse. She leaned closer. You've never ignored me before. I kept writing. Silence. It was remarkable how uncomfortable silence made manipulators. Eventually, she sighed dramatically.
Fine.
5 minutes later, she whispered again. My compass disappeared. There it was. Exactly on schedule. I didn't even look up. That's unfortunate. She blinked. That's all. What else would you like me to say? I thought you'd help me. You should tell the teacher. She frowned. I don't want to make a big deal. Of course not. Because the teacher wasn't the target. I was. At exactly 10:18 she stood. Miss. Our teacher turned. Yes, Cassie? I don't want anyone getting into trouble. She paused just long enough. But my geometry compass is missing. The classroom fell quiet. I had it before class. Mr. Lawson adjusted his glasses. Did you check your bag? I did. She nodded sadly. I noticed Mia was using a compass exactly like mine. 28 heads turned toward me. Here we go. The old embarrassment tried to crawl back into my chest. Not today. Mr. Lawson looked at me.
Mia.
I calmly lifted my geometry case onto the desk. This one. May I see it? Of course. I unlocked the small padlock. Several students looked surprised. Even the teacher raised an eyebrow. You keep your geometry case locked? Yes. Why? I've started taking better care of my things. Perfectly true. He opened the case. Everything lay neatly arranged. One compass. One protractor. One ruler. One set square. Nothing unusual. Cassie's smile returned. Tiny. Satisfied. Because this wasn't over. It looks just like mine. Mr. Lawson compared them. Their standard school issue. Cassie bit her lip. I guess I must have misplaced it. The class relaxed. Conversation resumed.
No accusation. No punishment.
No drama. Except, I remembered what happened next. I stood. Miss. The teacher looked over. Would it be all right if everyone's desk was checked? The room fell silent again. Cassie's face changed. Only for a fraction of a second. Enough. That's unnecessary, she said quickly. I smiled politely. It'll only take a minute. She laughed. I already said I probably lost it. I know. So why search? Because if it's really missing, someone might accidentally take it home. Reasonable. Logical. Impossible to argue with. Mr. Lawson nodded. Fair point. Cassie's fingers tightened around her pen. Students began opening pencil cases, checking drawers, looking beneath books. I stayed seated, waiting. 3 rows behind us. There it is. A boy named Liam held up a compass. It was under Cassie's desk. The classroom erupted into casual laughter.
Oh,
I knew it'd turn up. You must have dropped it. Cassie smiled too. Too quickly.
guess I'm blind.
But she wasn't looking at the compass.
She was looking at me.
Trying to understand. Because, in the previous life, that compass had been found inside my bag. I remembered crying in the principal's office while insisting I hadn't stolen anything. Nobody believed me. I hadn't even believed myself. I thought maybe I'd picked it up accidentally. Now I knew better. Cassie had never planned on losing her compass. She'd planned on finding it somewhere else. She simply hadn't expected me to change the script. Lunch was strangely quiet. Word spread surprisingly fast. Not because anything dramatic had happened. Because nothing had. People forgot about the compass within an hour. Cassie didn't. She found me in the library. Can we talk? I'd rather study. It'll only take a minute. Against my better judgment, I nodded. We walked outside beneath the jacaranda trees. Purple flowers drifted across the pavement. She folded her arms. You embarrass me. I suggested checking desks. You knew. Knew what? My compass was there. I didn't. Then why ask? I shrugged. It seemed sensible. She stared at me, searching,
Digging.
looking for the version of me she understood. I feel like you've become a different person overnight. If only she knew. People change. Not this much. I guess I did. She smiled again. I liked the old Mia. I believed her. The old Mia had been useful. That afternoon, something happened that wasn't in my memories.
Which terrified me.
The principal entered during English. I need Mia Harper for a moment. My stomach dropped. This wasn't supposed to happen. Every change created another. Butterfly effects. I'd expected them. Living through them was another matter. The principal led me into her office. Relax. Whenever adults said that, nobody relaxed. She sat behind her desk. I've been speaking with Mr. Lawson. About the compass? He mentioned you've become exceptionally organized recently. Okay. He also mentioned your mathematics scores have improved dramatically. Of course. I already knew half the curriculum from living through it once. We have an inter-school mathematics competition next month. I blinked. I was wondering if you'd like to represent the school. That hadn't happened before. Ever. Because in my previous life, Cassie had represented us. Not me. I remembered helping her prepare. Helping her practice. Helping her solve questions she'd later claimed she'd figured out herself. An entirely different future unfolded before me. I'd like that. The principal smiled. I thought you might. When school ended, rain poured across the parking lot. Students crowded beneath the entrance roof, waiting for parents. I opened my umbrella. A voice called behind me.
Mia.
Cassie jogged over, already soaked. My dad's running late. I said nothing. Can I share your umbrella? Such a tiny question.
Such an ordinary request.
Once, I would have answered before she'd finished asking. Instead, I remembered another rainy afternoon years later. The day she'd borrowed my umbrella because hers was broken. She returned it with a snapped frame. Then laughed. I guess it was old anyway. She'd never replaced it. Never apologized. Never even thanked me. The rain drummed steadily against the pavement. I looked at the umbrella. Then at her.
No.
She frowned. What? I'm using it. It fits two people.
I'm aware.
Seriously? Yes. You'd let me walk home in this? You said your dad's coming. She stared. Rain soaked her hair as students quietly watched from nearby. Nobody spoke. Nobody laughed. Nobody defended either of us. It wasn't dramatic. Just unexpected. Finally, she smiled. A different smile. One I'd almost forgotten.
No worms. No squeakneys.
Just calculation. I don't know what's happened to you. I met her eyes. I finally started paying attention. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then headlights pulled into the parking lot. Her father's car. She walked away without another word. I stood beneath my umbrella until she climbed inside. As the car drove past, she looked out the passenger window. Not angry. Thinking. Planning. That frightened me more than shouting ever could. Because Cassie only became quiet when she was building something. And in my first life, every time she built something, I was the one who ended up trapped inside it. On Monday morning, I found a folded note inside my locker. It wasn't there when I'd opened it before first period, which meant someone had slipped it in while I was in class. The paper contained only one sentence. You're changing too much. No name. No handwriting I immediately recognized. Just neat block letters. The old me would have shown a teacher. The old me would have worried about who disliked me. Instead, I folded the note, slid it into my notebook, and closed my locker. Someone wanted me unsettled. The question wasn't who.
It was why.
Because whoever wrote it knew something had changed. Chemistry practicals usually bored me. In my previous life, they had been little more than another opportunity for Cassie to pair herself with whoever she wanted answers from. Today, the teacher announced partners at random. Cassie with Oliver. Mia with Hannah. I caught the smallest flash of disappointment on Cassie's face before she replaced it with a smile. Interesting. She hadn't wanted Oliver. She'd wanted me. Not because she liked me, because she preferred keeping me within arm's reach. Hannah adjusted her safety glasses. I've never actually worked with you before. Neither have I. I've heard you're really good at maths. I just study. She laughed. Everyone who gets 98% says that. 98. I paused. In my previous life, I'd scored 82. Another ripple. Changing one decision had somehow changed dozens more. Halfway through the experiment, our teacher walked around checking results. Hannah nudged me. Can you hold this? I took the beaker while she adjusted the stand. Across the room, I noticed Cassie. She wasn't paying attention to her experiment. She was watching ours. More specifically, she was watching me. Whenever I glanced over, she immediately looked away. She was studying, collecting information, trying to figure out what version of Mia she was dealing with. That uncertainty was becoming my greatest advantage. At lunch, Hannah invited me to sit with her group. That had never happened before. The old me ate with Cassie almost every day, meaning I'd never really met anyone else. I hesitated only briefly before following.
There were 6 of them. Hannah, Liam, Sophie,
Jordan, Emily,
Noah.
Ordinary people. The kind I'd spent years believing didn't like me. Within 10 minutes, I realized something painful. They'd never disliked me. They simply assumed I already had friends. So, Jordan grinned. Settles an argument. I smiled. What argument? Pineapple on pizza. Oh no, Hannah groaned. Don't start again. For the first time in what felt like decades, I laughed without wondering whether someone would use it against me later. It felt strange. Safe. I hadn't realized how exhausting constant vigilance had become until I experienced an hour without it. The piece lasted exactly 3 periods. When final bell rang, I opened my locker. Everything inside had been rearranged. Books upside down.
Folders bent.
Notebook missing. Nothing valuable gone. Just enough disorder to make me question myself. I searched carefully. The notebook containing the anonymous note was gone. I closed my eyes. She wasn't stealing. She was testing. Seeing whether I'd panic. Whether I'd accuse someone. Whether I'd react. I didn't. Instead, I walked directly to lost property. Nothing. Library. Nothing. Reception. Nothing. Exactly as expected. On my way back, someone called my name.
Mia.
Mrs. Carter. The school librarian. I think this belongs to you. She held up my notebook. Relief washed through me. Where was it? It was left on one of the study tables. Interesting. Not hidden. Displayed. Someone wanted it found. I thanked her before checking inside. Every page remained. Except one. The note.
Gone.
That evening, I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by old memories. Not photographs. Predictions. I filled page after page with everything I remembered.
Dates.
Competitions. Arguments. Teachers transferring schools. Scholarship deadlines. Birthdays. Exams. The list stretched longer than I expected. Then I stopped writing. Because one realization hit me harder than any other. The future was already changing, meaning every memory became less reliable with each decision I made. Eventually, I wouldn't know what came next. For some reason, that terrified me. Tuesday began with assembly. The principal stood on stage announcing upcoming events. Then, our mathematics competition team will consist of Mia Harper, applause, and Cassie Reynolds. I blinked. Cassie too? That wasn't right. Previously, she'd competed alone. Another change. As students clapped politely, I looked toward her. She was already looking back, smiling. Of course. Now we'd have to work together. After assembly, Mr. Lawson handed each of us a practice booklet. You'll meet every Wednesday after school. Cassie beamed. This'll be fun. I simply nodded. When everyone else left, she lingered. You know, she leaned against a desk. I've been thinking. Dangerous hobby. She laughed. There you are. What? The sarcasm. I've always had it.
No.
Her smile remained perfectly calm. You used to apologize after every joke. I hadn't realized that.
Apparently she had.
You really notice everything. I notice people.
No.
She noticed leverage. There was a difference. The first practice session started the following afternoon. Only 4 students attended. Mr. Lawson supervised while we solved increasingly difficult problems. For almost 2 hours, nobody spoke much. Then came the final question. An Olympiad-level geometry proof. Mr. Lawson smiled. This one usually takes university students a while. I looked down. Recognition hit instantly. I'd solved this exact proof in university. Not because I was brilliant, because I'd seen it before. Within 8 minutes, I finished. Mr. Lawson checked my work. His eyebrows lifted. Excellent. Across the table, Cassie hadn't written a single conclusion. She watched him praise me. Her pencil stopped moving. For the first time, she wasn't the smartest person in the room. And she knew it. When practice ended, she caught up with me outside. Where did you learn that? I studied.
No.
You've never solved questions like that.
People kept saying that.
Maybe because they were right. I guess I improved. You improved too much. I shrugged. Hard work. She folded her arms. You think I'm stupid?
No.
I know when people are lying. Our eyes met. Neither of us looked away. Then I smiled. So do I. She stood perfectly still. For one brief moment, her confidence cracked. Only slightly, but enough. That Friday, rain returned. Students crowded inside during lunch. The corridors became loud.
Chaotic. Perfect for gossip.
I was returning a library book when voices drifted from the stairwell. She's weird now.
Cassie.
Another girl answered. I thought you two were best friends. We are. You don't sound like it. Cassie sighed dramatically. I'm just worried. Worried? She barely sleeps. I stopped walking. She's talking to herself.
Lie.
And honestly, another pause. I don't think she's coping very well. I closed my eyes. There it was.
Concern.
The most convincing disguise manipulation had ever invented. Not insults. Sympathy. Because sympathy spread faster. The other girl sounded genuinely worried. Should someone tell a teacher? I don't want her getting embarrassed. How generous. How thoughtful. How carefully constructed. I walked around the corner before they noticed me. The conversation stopped instantly. Cassie smiled.
Mia.
Were you looking for us?
No.
I continued walking. Didn't argue. Didn't defend myself. Didn't ask why she was lying. Behind me, I heard the other girl's uncertain voice. I'll see you later. Footsteps retreated.
Cassie remained.
She caught up beside me. You heard. Some of it. Aren't you going to ask? Ask what? If it's true. I looked ahead.
No.
Why not? Because I already know. She frowned. Know what? The difference between concern. I opened the library door. And performance. Then I stepped inside, leaving her standing alone in the hallway. For the first time since returning, I saw something I'd never seen on Cassie's face before. Not anger. Not frustration. Not even confusion. It was something much rarer. She was running out of certainty. And people like Cassie relied on certainty the way everyone else relied on air. Without it, they started making mistakes. I intended to be there when the first real one happened. The first real mistake came sooner than I expected. It happened because Cassie grew impatient. Manipulative people often looked impossibly patient from the outside. They waited for opportunities. They planted ideas and let other people water them. They nudged instead of pushed. But patience had limits. And uncertainty wore through hers faster than I thought it would. Monday morning, she greeted me at my locker as though nothing had happened.
Morning. Morning.
I was thinking. I know. She laughed.
No. Seriously. I'm listening.
My birthday's coming up this weekend. I remembered. She'd invited nearly everyone in our year, including me, especially me. In my previous life, I'd spent 3 weeks helping her decorate the venue. I'd baked cupcakes with my mother because Cassie claimed she couldn't cook. I'd spent nearly $200 on a bracelet she'd pointed out in a shop window. 3 days after her party, she forgot my birthday entirely. Not accidentally. She remembered. She simply didn't think it mattered. I hope you can come, she said. I can't. Her smile stayed exactly the same. Oh. I've already got plans. You don't even know what day it is. I know. So, what plans? I looked at her. Personal ones. For a fraction of a second, irritation flashed across her face before disappearing. You've become really private. I suppose I have. I miss when we told each other everything. That sentence almost made me laugh. We had never told each other everything. I'd told her everything. She'd told me whatever benefited her. There was a difference. During English, our teacher announced a semester project. Groups of 3. Immediately, hands shot into the air. Students began choosing partners.
Cassie stood.
Mia and I. I'll work with Hannah and Liam. The words left my mouth before she finished speaking. The teacher nodded. That's fine. Cassie lowered her hand. Again. Too slow. Not because she was embarrassed. Because she'd expected the outcome to be different. She spent the rest of the lesson partnered with Oliver and Sophie. Every few minutes, I caught her looking in my direction. Not with jealousy. With calculation. She was trying to understand why every plan involving me suddenly failed. Working with Hannah and Liam turned out to be unexpectedly enjoyable. They actually divided the workload evenly. No one disappeared the night before the deadline. No one forgot to do their section. No one expected someone else to quietly rescue the project. When the bell rang, Hannah smiled. I'm really glad we ended up together. So am I. You know, she hesitated. I always wanted to ask you to join us at lunch before. You did. You were always with Cassie.
Oh.
We figured you weren't interested. That word echoed inside my head.
Figured.
Nobody had rejected me. They'd simply assumed. How many opportunities had I missed because I'd mistaken assumptions for reality? Wednesday afternoon brought another mathematics training session. Mr. Lawson handed us a mock competition paper. 90 minutes. No talking. Good luck. The room fell silent. Questions filled page after page. Algebra.
Proofs.
Combinatorics. Geometry. I felt strangely calm. Not because I knew every answer. Because I remembered what panic had cost me in my previous life. When time was called, Mr. Lawson collected the papers without saying a word. He marked them while we packed our bags. Then, I wasn't planning to tell you until next week. He looked up. But, congratulations, Mia. I blinked. You achieved the highest practice score this school has ever recorded. The room became very quiet. Even I hadn't expected that. I started. Thank you. Mr. Lawson smiled proudly. You should be proud of yourself. Across the room, Cassie zipped her bag a little too forcefully. The metal teeth caught. She frowned. Pulled harder. Nothing. She sighed quietly before forcing it closed. It seemed insignificant. At the time, I barely noticed. Thursday morning, whispers followed me through the hallway. Normally, that would have made me nervous. Instead, I realized they weren't cruel. They said she got full marks. I heard 99. No, 100. Rumors. For once, not destructive ones. I reached my locker. Someone tapped my shoulder. It was Emily. Our study group's meeting after school. She smiled. You should come. I've never been to a study group. That's exactly why. I nodded. I'd like that. She grinned before walking away. Simple.
Easy.
No hidden meaning. The old me would have spent the next hour wondering whether it was genuine. The new me accepted it for what it was. An invitation. Nothing more. Nothing less. That afternoon, while walking toward the library, I heard raised voices from the art room. One belonged to Cassie. I said it won't open. Another girl laughed. Just yank it. I've tried. Then break the zipper. My footsteps stopped. Every hair on my arms stood up. Those words. Break the zipper. The exact sentence. The one I'd heard just before dying. The memory hit with startling force. Metal scraping. Laughter. The unbearable feeling that something precious was about to be destroyed. Slowly, I stepped closer to the open doorway. Cassie stood beside a table, pulling angrily at a dark blue fabric case. Not a school bag. Not a backpack. A compact, zippered document pouch. She tugged again. Nothing. Her classmate shrugged. Seriously. It's probably caught on the lining. Just force it. Cassie frowned. I don't want to damage it. It's only a zipper. Only a zipper. I almost laughed at the irony.
To rush.
To ignore that tiny voice saying, maybe stop for a second. Now she hesitated. I watched silently from the hallway. Another student approached. Need help. The zipper's jammed. He reached for it. I can pull harder.
No.
Cassie stopped him immediately. I'll figure it out. Interesting. Very interesting. She cared what was inside. Enough not to risk breaking it. The teacher entered before anything else happened. Everyone returned to work. I continued toward the library. But the moment stayed with me. Friday arrived. The study group met after school in one of the smaller classrooms. There were 7 of us. People shared notes, explained difficult questions, argued over chemistry formulas,
Laughed.
For 2 hours, nobody competed. Nobody kept score. Walking home afterward, I realized something strange. I couldn't remember feeling lonely all week. Not once. I'd spent so much of my previous life believing Cassie was my only friend that I'd never looked around. There had always been people willing to know me. I'd simply never given them the chance. Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. A message. Cassie, hope you can still make it today. I stared at the screen, then typed, me, I won't be coming. Have a nice birthday. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared.
Appeared again.
Finally. Cassie. That's disappointing. I didn't reply. Instead, I put my phone away and helped my brother organize his scholarship documents. The scholarship. The one he'd lost in my first life. Now, because the flash drive had survived, everything was different. He submitted the application that afternoon. Watching him leave with a confident smile felt like watching history heal itself one stitch at a time. Monday morning, the school buzzed with stories from Cassie's party. Who danced? Who spilled drinks? Who embarrassed themselves? Ordinary teenage gossip. Then something unexpected happened. Hannah sat beside me before first period. You weren't there.
No.
You made the right choice. What happened? She lowered her voice. There was this weird argument. Between who? Cassie and one of her cousins. I remained silent. They were looking for some important documents. They'd been inside this zippered folder. My heartbeat slowed. It wouldn't open. They kept trying to force it. Did they? Apparently the zipper completely broke. I looked out the classroom window. Rain clouds gathered in the distance. What happened to the documents? They had to cut the whole thing open. She shrugged. I don't know why everyone was so upset.
I did.
I didn't know what had been inside. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Life had a strange sense of symmetry. Later that day, I passed Cassie in the hallway. She looked tired. The first genuine exhaustion I'd ever seen on her face. She stopped walking. So, you've changed. I know. I don't think I like the new you. I considered that. Then smiled gently. I don't think you were ever supposed to. For several seconds, she said nothing. Students flowed around us, filling the corridor with conversations and laughter. Finally, she asked quietly, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" It was the first honest question she'd ever asked me. Or maybe the first one that sounded honest. I chose my words carefully. People become who their choices repeatedly make them. She searched my face. And if they change, then eventually people notice that too. She nodded once. Not agreeing. Not disagreeing. Just thinking. Then she walked away. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. I didn't know whether she'd become a better person. Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe some stories didn't end with dramatic redemption. Maybe they ended with distance. Sometimes distance was enough. That evening, I unlocked the small drawer beside my desk. Inside lay my blue plastic protractor case. The same one. The same tiny padlock. The same slightly scratched surface. I rested my hand on it for a long moment. In another life, I believed this little case represented the moment everything fell apart. Now I understood the truth. It had never been about the case, or the zipper, or the broken flash drive. It had been about a single habit I'd carried for years. Whenever someone insisted, whenever someone pressured, whenever someone laughed and said, "Just do it," I had. Without stopping to ask whether I wanted to, without asking who benefited, without asking what it might cost. This time I had asked. This time I had kept it locked. And that one small decision had quietly changed every chapter that followed. I smiled to myself before placing the case back inside the drawer. Then I turned the key. Not because I was afraid of losing what was inside, but because I'd finally learned something worth protecting. My own judgment. I thought keeping the protractor case locked had ended the story. I was wrong. It had only prevented the first disaster. The second one was waiting. And this time, it wasn't hidden inside a pencil case. It was hidden inside a recommendation letter. 2 weeks after the mathematics competition, Mr. Lawson asked me to stay behind after class. As the last student left, he closed the classroom door and sat on the edge of his desk. "I have a question." "Okay. Have you ever considered applying for the National Young Scholars Program?" I blinked. That hadn't happened before.
No.
"I think you should." He handed me a brochure. "The deadline is in 3 weeks." I skimmed the front page. The program selected only 20 students across the state each year. Winners received mentorship, university placements, and scholarship opportunities. In my previous life, I had never even heard of it.
Why?
Because Cassie had applied.
She had been accepted.
She never mentioned it to anyone until after the results came out. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Another memory surfaced. Late one afternoon, years ago, she'd casually said, "I only got in because my recommendation letter was amazing." Recommendation letter. Mr. Lawson. Now, everything made sense. "I'll think about it," I said. "Think quickly." He smiled. "I've already agreed to write your recommendation if you decide." By lunchtime, I had already made up my mind. I was applying. Not because I wanted to compete with Cassie. Because I'd spent an entire lifetime shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. I wasn't doing that again. That afternoon, Hannah and Liam stayed behind to help me organize the application checklist. You've got most of it already, Liam said. Your grades are insane. I've just been studying a lot.
He laughed.
Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Hannah nudged my shoulder. And if you get in, don't forget us. I couldn't. I'll remind you anyway.
We laughed.
It was such an ordinary conversation. Yet every ordinary moment felt extraordinary now. Because I wasn't spending my afternoon solving someone else's problems. I was finally building something that belonged to me. The following morning, Cassie approached me before first period. I heard you're applying. News traveled quickly. You never mentioned being interested. I wasn't. So why now? I smiled. I changed my mind. She folded her arms. I've already started my application. I know. You know. She frowned. Who told you? I shrugged. I heard. Not technically a lie. Memory had told me. She studied my face. Well. She forced a smile. Good luck. You too. We walked into class together. Neither of us spoke. 3 days later, Mr. Lawson asked both of us to remain after mathematics. I've finished your recommendation letters. He held 2 sealed envelopes. One with my name. One with Cassie's. I don't want either of you opening them. He smiled. The committee prefers confidential recommendations. We both nodded. As we left the classroom, I noticed Cassie staring at my envelope. Not casually. Intently. Almost thoughtfully. The same look she'd worn while watching my locked geometry case. Immediately, every instinct sharpened. I slipped my envelope into a plastic document folder. Then into my backpack. Then zipped the backpack completely. That afternoon, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I stopped at the library to finish chemistry homework. When I finally returned to my locker, the hallway was almost empty.
Perfect.
Or so I thought. As I reached for the handle, I heard footsteps behind me.
Cassie.
I've been looking for you. I was studying. She leaned against the neighboring locker. I wanted to ask something. Go ahead. Do you trust Mr. Lawson? The question caught me off guard. Yes. What if? She hesitated. What if teachers accidentally mixed up recommendation letters? I looked at her carefully. They didn't. You don't know that.
I don't. How?
Because I'd watched you thinking about my envelope for the last 3 days. Because I knew how your mind worked. Because every what if from you usually benefited only one person. I just do. She smiled faintly. I think it'd be worth checking. I don't. What if yours actually belongs to me? It doesn't. You seem awfully certain. I am. Silence settled between us. Finally, she laughed.
I guess I'm overthinking.
I think you are. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation. Not because I believed the letters had been switched. Because she'd wanted me to open mine.
Why?
The answer arrived while I brushed my teeth. If I broke the committee's confidentiality instructions, my application could be disqualified. She wasn't trying to steal my recommendation. She was trying to make me disqualify myself. I leaned against the bathroom sink. Incredible. Even now. She never pushed directly. She simply suggested. The decision would have been mine. The consequences, too. The mathematics competition arrived on Friday. Hundreds of students filled the university lecture theater. The atmosphere buzzed with nervous excitement. Cassie sat 2 rows ahead of me. She looked confident, collected,
prepared.
For a brief moment, I wondered whether I'd imagined everything. Maybe I'd become paranoid. Maybe. She turned around. Our eyes met. She smiled, then deliberately tapped the side pocket of her backpack. The one holding her sealed recommendation letter.
Top.
Not a nervous habit. A reminder.
She wanted me thinking about mine.
Even here. I smiled politely and looked away.
No.
I wasn't imagining anything. The competition lasted 4 hours. Some questions were impossible. others surprisingly straightforward. When time was called, I felt peaceful. Not certain I'd won. Just satisfied I'd done my best. As students poured out of the building, Hannah waved from the waiting area. "How was it?" "My brain hurts." She laughed. Good sign. Before I could answer, someone bumped into me.
Hard.
My backpack slipped from one shoulder. Papers scattered across the pavement. "I'm so sorry," a boy said quickly.
No worries.
Several students helped gather everything. Within seconds, my papers were back inside. Normal. Accidental. Except, as I zipped my bag, I noticed something. The front pocket. Half open. I never left it open. Never. I checked inside immediately.
Calculator.
Notebook.
Pens.
Plastic folder. Recommendation letter. Still there. Untouched. Whoever had opened the pocket hadn't had enough time. Or they'd been interrupted. I slowly looked around the crowded courtyard. Cassie stood near the bus stop, watching. The moment our eyes met, she looked away. That evening, I told Ethan everything. Not just about the envelope. Everything. The compass. The rumors. The pressure. The strange conversations. He listened without interrupting. Finally, he spoke. "You think she's manipulating people?" "I know she is. And nobody else sees it." "Not yet." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know what people like that hate?" "What?" "Witnesses." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "They rely on private conversations." He leaned forward. "Stop meeting her alone." The simplicity of the advice surprised me. He was right. Every significant interaction happened when nobody else was around. Locker hallways, rooftops, empty classrooms, stairwells, places without witnesses. From that day forward, I made a quiet promise. If Cassie wanted to talk, she could do it where everyone could hear. The opportunity came much sooner than expected. Monday morning, outside the library.
Mia.
I turned. Cassie smiled. "Can we talk?" "Sure." She glanced toward the empty corridor. "Somewhere private?" I shook my head. "We can talk here. There are people around." "I know. I'd rather it just be us." "I'm comfortable here." For the first time since returning. She looked genuinely frustrated. "It's personal." "Then you can message me." She stared for several long seconds. Then smiled. "You're making this difficult."
No.
I answered calmly. "I'm making it public." Something shifted in her expression. Almost imperceptibly. She realized I'd identified one of her greatest advantages. And I'd quietly taken it away. She walked off without another word. I watched her disappear into the crowd. For the first time, since waking up back in year 11, I had the unmistakable feeling that the balance had finally changed. Not because I'd defeated her, but because I'd stopped playing by rules she'd written. And somehow, that frightened her far more than any argument ever could. By the time the mathematics competition results were due, the entire school seemed to know my name. I hated it, not because people were cruel, because attention had a way of inviting expectations. Teachers smiled a little longer when they passed me in the corridor. Students I barely knew asked how the competition went. Even year 10s I'd never spoken to nodded politely as if we'd met before. In my previous life, I'd spent years wishing people would notice me. Now I understood there was a difference between being seen and being watched. One felt warm, the other felt cold. And lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching. Wednesday morning started like any other, until I reached my locker. A small envelope rested on the floor beneath it. No name.
No stamp.
Just my locker number written across the front. My pulse quickened. I looked up and down the hallway. Students hurried toward first period, too busy talking to pay me any attention. Slowly, I picked it up. Inside was a single folded sheet. 3 typed sentences. Some people don't change because they regret what they did. They change because they get caught. Don't forget that. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. Unlike the first anonymous note, this one didn't feel threatening. It felt like a warning. But from whom? I slipped the paper into a clear plastic sleeve inside my notebook. Evidence. That was another lesson adulthood had taught me. Memory wasn't evidence. Feelings weren't evidence. If something felt important, keep it. If someone denied it later, paper rarely forgot. Halfway through first period, the principal entered our classroom. I have some wonderful news. The room immediately quieted. The mathematics competition results arrived this morning. My stomach tightened. We're incredibly proud to announce. She smiled. That Mia Harper achieved first place in the regional division. The classroom erupted into applause. For a second, I couldn't hear anything except the pounding of my own heartbeat. First. Not just a good result. First. Mr. Lawson looked genuinely emotional. I knew you could do it. I stood awkwardly while students congratulated me. Across the room, I searched for Cassie. She clapped. She even smiled. To anyone else, she looked sincerely happy. But I'd watched that smile too many times. It never reached her eyes. At recess, students crowded around me asking questions. What was the hardest question? Are you going to nationals? How long did you study? I answered as honestly as I could. I don't really know. I just practiced. It wasn't easy. Eventually, Hannah rescued me. Okay, everyone. She's still a person. The group laughed before drifting away. When they were gone, Hannah nudged my shoulder. You look overwhelmed. I kind of am. You'll get used to it. I hope not. She smiled. I think that's exactly why people like you. The compliment caught me off guard. People like you. Nobody had ever said that to me before. That afternoon, our English teacher returned the first draft of our semester project. Every group received feedback. Most needed revisions. Ours received the highest mark. Liam grinned. I told you we'd smash it. Hannah laughed. I think Mia's editing saved us. No, I said. We all worked on it. And that's why it worked. She was right. Nobody carried anyone else. Nobody took credit for someone else's work. It felt balanced. Healthy. I wondered how many relationships I'd mistaken for friendships simply because imbalance had become familiar. As school ended, I packed my bag slowly. I wanted the hallway to clear before heading to my locker. When I finally stepped outside, someone was already waiting. Not Cassie. Mr. Lawson. Walking home. Yeah. He adjusted the strap on his satchel. I thought I'd tell you before the official announcement. What announcement? The National Young Scholars Program contacted the school. My heart skipped. You've advanced to the final interview stage. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Really? He nodded proudly. They were extremely impressed. I thanked him more times than necessary before he finally laughed. I'll let you enjoy the news. As he walked away, I leaned against the lockers, trying to steady my breathing. Final interview. I hadn't just applied. I actually had a chance. You seem happy. The voice came from behind me. Cassie. I turned slowly. I got some good news. I heard. Of course she had. She smiled politely. Congratulations. Thank you. I didn't make the interview. The word surprised me. In my previous life, she had. Another future rewritten. I'm sorry. She shrugged. It happens. For a second, I almost believed she meant it. Then she added quietly. Funny how everything started changing after you stopped helping people. There it was. The hook. The tiny barb hidden inside an ordinary sentence. I looked at her. I still help people. Not me. No. I noticed. She tilted her head slightly. I wonder what everyone else would think if they knew how cold you've become. I smiled gently. I think they'd ask why you expected so much from me. Her expression froze. Just for an instant. Then she laughed. You've gotten really good at answering questions with questions. I've gotten better at recognizing them. The interview preparation consumed the next 2 weeks. Mock interviews. Essay practice. Current affairs. Presentation skills. Every afternoon seemed to disappear before I noticed. Somehow, despite everything, Life began feeling normal. Not perfect, just peaceful. Until Friday. The final bell rang. Students flooded toward the exits. I stopped by my locker. As I turned the key, I noticed something unusual. The small hidden stitch inside my blazer pocket had come loose. The pocket where I kept my locker key. I frowned. I hadn't touched the stitching. Slowly, I checked inside. The key was still there. So why? A cold realization settled over me. Someone had searched my pocket. Not successfully. But they'd tried. I immediately inspected my locker. Nothing missing. Nothing moved. Yet the uneasy feeling remained. Whoever had done it hadn't found what they wanted. Because they hadn't known where to look. That evening, Ethan listened while replacing the loose stitches himself. You've got someone determined. I know. You still think it's her? I don't know anymore. And that was true. For the first time, I genuinely wasn't certain. Because the anonymous notes, the attempted search, they didn't quite fit. Cassie preferred influence, not secrecy. Someone else had entered the picture. Someone who knew enough to watch me, but not enough to understand me. Monday morning answered one question, and created 3 more. I arrived early. Only the cleaners and a handful of teachers were in the building. As I rounded the corner toward the lockers, I stopped. Cassie stood there. Alone. She hadn't seen me. She wasn't at her own locker. She was standing in front of mine. Looking at it. Not touching it. Just looking. Then she slowly stepped back. Pulled out her phone. Took a photograph. My stomach tightened. Before I could react, footsteps echoed behind her. She quickly slipped the phone away and walked off in the opposite direction. She never realized I'd been watching. I waited until she'd disappeared before approaching. Why photograph my locker? Not the contents. Just the door. The number. The lock. It didn't make sense. Unless... No. Surely not. That afternoon, while everyone else headed home, I walked into the administration office. The receptionist looked up. Can I help you? I was wondering. I hesitated. Does the school have security cameras in the locker hallway? She nodded. Yes. Not many. Just enough. Why? I smiled politely. I thought I might have dropped something there this morning. If you really need footage, you have to speak with the deputy principal. I understand. As I walked back outside, my mind raced. For weeks, I'd been reacting, avoiding, defending. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for proof to appear by accident. Maybe it was time to find it. Because whether the anonymous notes came from Cassie or someone else entirely, one thing had become painfully clear. This story hadn't ended when I locked the Protractor case. It had only changed who was holding the key. The deputy principal agreed to meet with me the following morning. Not because I insisted. Because I gave him a reason that sounded entirely ordinary. I think someone may have tried to open my locker, I explained. I could be mistaken. I'd just like to know if anything unusual happened. He folded his hands on the desk. We don't normally review security footage unless there's evidence of theft. I understand. I just wanted to ask. He studied me for a moment before nodding. I'll have a look. You don't need to wait. If anything stands out, I'll let you know. I thanked him and left. As I walked back to class, I realized how different I had become. The old me would have begged, apologized for bothering him, questioned whether I deserved help. Now, I simply presented the facts and accepted whatever happened next. It felt lighter. The interview for the National Young Scholars Program was only 6 days away. My evenings disappeared into preparation. Current affairs, mathematics puzzles, ethics questions, mock interviews with Ethan. He took the role far too seriously. What is your greatest weakness? He asked one evening. I overthink. That's everyone's answer. It's true. It can be true and still be boring. I rolled my eyes. You sound like an interviewer.
I'm practicing.
He grinned. You've got one chance to convince people you deserve a place. He leaned forward. Don't tell them you're hardworking. Why not? They'll expect that. So what do I say? He smiled. Tell them what changed you. The words lingered long after he finished. Tell them what changed you. If only he knew. The following afternoon, Mr. Lawson stopped me outside the staff room. I've got something for you. He handed me a folder filled with previous interview questions. These are from former students. Thank you. You don't owe me thanks.
Ido.
He smiled.
No.
You earned this. As he turned to leave, he paused.
Oh.
One more thing. The committee isn't looking for the smartest student. They're looking for the most teachable one. That sentence echoed in my mind all evening. In my previous life, I would have interpreted it as, don't seem too confident. This time, I heard something completely different.
Be honest.
Friday morning brought unexpected news. The deputy principal called me into his office before assembly. I reviewed the footage. My heartbeat quickened, and he opened a notebook. There wasn't any attempt to force your locker. I nodded slowly. I didn't think so. However, he looked up. I did notice something unusual. My stomach tightened. A student was standing outside your locker for approximately 3 minutes before school. Cassie Reynolds. He said the name matter-of-factly.
No accusation.
Just observation. She never touched the locker. She simply appeared to photograph it. Exactly what I'd seen. I asked whether she needed assistance. What did she say? She claimed she was waiting for a friend. He closed the notebook. Technically, she didn't break any rules. I understand. If anything further happens, let us know. I will. Walking out of the office, I felt strangely calm. The footage hadn't exposed a crime, but it had confirmed something important. I wasn't imagining things anymore. Assembly began 5 minutes later. The principal stepped onto the stage. We have several achievements to celebrate. Students clapped politely. Then, our regional mathematics champion. I wish the floor would open beneath me.
Mia Harper.
The applause felt louder this time. I walked onto the stage, accepted the certificate, smiled for the photograph. As I stepped down, I caught sight of Cassie sitting in the 3rd row. She clapped.
Perfectly.
Gracefully. If someone froze that moment into a photograph, she'd look like my biggest supporter. Photographs could lie. I knew that better than anyone. After assembly, she approached me in the corridor. Congratulations. Thank you. You deserve it. I appreciate that. She hesitated. I meant it. I looked at her carefully. For the first time, I wasn't entirely sure whether she was lying. That uncertainty unsettled me more than certainty ever had. The interview day arrived faster than I expected. The university campus felt enormous. Students from dozens of schools waited in a quiet lounge outside the interview rooms. Some revised notes. Some paced. Some stared silently at the floor. I chose a seat beside the window. A girl across from me smiled. Nervous? A little. Me too.
I'm Priya. Mia.
Within minutes, we were talking about mathematics, books, and university plans. No competition.
No posturing.
Just conversation. It reminded me how large the world really was. For months, my entire attention had revolved around one person. Now, surrounded by strangers with extraordinary talents, that world suddenly seemed much bigger. My name is Mia Harper. A staff member stood at the doorway. It's your turn. I stood, smoothed my blazer, walked inside. 3 interviewers greeted me warmly. The questions began simply. Tell us about yourself. What subject excites you most? What challenge taught you the most? Then came the final question. If you could go back and change one decision in your life. My heart stopped. Would you? For a split second, I forgot to breathe. The room disappeared. I saw a blue plastic protractor case, a stubborn zipper, a broken flash drive. My brother's devastated expression. A lifetime I'd lost. I couldn't tell them the truth, but I could tell them something honest. I used to believe kindness meant saying yes. The panel listened quietly. I thought helping people meant never disappointing them. I smiled softly. I've learned that real kindness includes honesty. Sometimes protecting something important means politely refusing. I don't think that makes someone selfish. I think it allows them to keep helping for much longer. One interviewer nodded slowly. Another wrote something down. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, "Thank you, Mia." I knew I'd answered the question I actually needed to answer. School felt strangely peaceful the following Monday. The interview was over. There was nothing left to prepare, nothing left to prove. As I unpacked my books, Hannah sat beside me. "So, how'd it go?" "I honestly don't know." She laughed. "That's usually a good sign." "Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, it was finished." At lunch, I walked past the art room. The same long tables, the same cabinets filled with projects. Something caught my eye. Cassie stood near the teacher's desk with another student. Between them rested the dark blue zippered document pouch, the one whose zipper had jammed weeks earlier. Except now, the zipper had been cut away entirely. The fabric around it was frayed, where someone had sliced it open. Cassie looked exhausted. The teacher sighed sympathetically. "I'm sorry. I know those originals can't be replaced." Originals. Whatever had been inside hadn't been copies. They'd mattered. A great deal. Cassie thanked her quietly before picking up the damaged pouch. As she turned, our eyes met. Neither of us smiled. She looked down at the ruined zipper, then back at me. For just a moment, it felt as though we were both remembering the same sentence. "Just force it." Neither of us spoke. She walked past without another word. I watched her disappear down the corridor. Not with satisfaction. Not with revenge. Only with a quiet understanding. Sometimes life had a peculiar way of teaching people the lessons they refused to hear from someone else. And for the first time, since waking up in my younger body, I no longer felt like I was trying to outrun the past. I was finally walking toward a future that belonged to me. 3 weeks later, the email arrived. Not mine. Ethan's. I was sitting at the kitchen table pretending to revise biology when I heard the front door slam so hard that the family photo hanging in the hallway tilted sideways.
"Mia."
His voice cracked. For one terrifying second, I thought something terrible had happened. I ran into the hallway. He stood there frozen, still holding his phone, his backpack hanging from one shoulder. Our mother appeared from the kitchen. "What is it?" He looked at both of us. Then he laughed. Not politely. Not quietly. The kind of laugh that escaped after carrying something heavy for far too long. "I got it." Nobody spoke. "I got the scholarship." My mother covered her mouth. "What?" "I got it." He looked at me. "They accepted me." His eyes were already filling with tears. They accepted the project. For a moment, the world disappeared. I threw my arms around him so hard, he nearly dropped his phone. This was why I'd been given another chance. Not medals. Not competitions. Not proving anyone wrong. The future that had been stolen from him the first time. The flash drive had survived. His work had survived. And now, so had his dream. That night we celebrated with takeaway pizza. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. Yet it felt richer than any restaurant I remembered from my first life. At one point Ethan looked across the table. "You know what? I keep thinking. If you'd forgotten that flash drive." He laughed softly. "I don't even want to imagine it." I smiled. "Neither do I. Only I could. I'd lived that version already." The following Monday, everyone at school seemed unusually restless. Teachers whispered in the corridors. Students kept checking their phones. By recess, the reason became obvious. The National Young Scholars Program had released its results. My hands shook as I opened the email. "Congratulations." I stopped reading. I couldn't. My vision blurred instantly. Hannah grabbed my shoulder. "What? What does it say?" I handed her the phone. She gasped, then screamed. "You got in." The library turned toward us. Liam nearly knocked over his chair rushing across the room. "No way. You actually did it." For several minutes, everything became a blur of congratulations. Teachers,
Friends.
students I'd barely spoken to. I kept smiling because I genuinely couldn't stop. When things finally quieted down, Mr. Lawson found me outside the library. I heard. He looked prouder than I felt. I wouldn't have made it without your help. He shook his head.
No.
I gave you worksheets. You did the rest. He extended his hand, then changed his mind and pulled me into a brief hug. I'm proud of you, Mia. 3 simple words. Yet somehow, I'd waited an entire lifetime to hear them. That afternoon, I found Cassie sitting alone beneath the jacaranda tree near the oval. The same place where we'd once eaten lunch together almost every day. She looked up as I approached. Congratulations. Her voice sounded tired. Thank you. I could have walked away. Maybe I should have. Instead, I sat on the bench opposite her. For a while, neither of us spoke. Purple flowers drifted silently between us. Finally, she broke the silence. I owe you an apology. I didn't answer. I've been thinking a lot. She looked down at her hands. I kept blaming bad luck. The competition. The scholarship. The interviews. My cousin's documents. The zipper. She gave a humorless laugh. I blamed everything except myself. I remembered the ruined document pouch. The cut fabric. The broken zipper. I told my cousin to force it. She continued quietly. I said. Her voice caught. It's only a zipper. The exact words. She looked at me. When we finally cut it open, she swallowed. The documents inside were damaged. They weren't completely destroyed, but enough. I keep replaying it. She stared at the ground. I should have stopped. Neither of us moved. The wind carried another purple flower between us. I remembered something. She smiled weakly. I said almost the same thing to you once. About your protractor case. She didn't need to say it. We both knew. I laughed when you hesitated. She closed her eyes. I never even asked what was inside. For the first time, there was no performance. No audience. No carefully chosen tears. Just regret. Real regret. I spent weeks wondering why you'd changed. She looked back at me. I thought you suddenly hated me. I don't hate you. I know. I think that's what confused me. I smiled faintly. I just stopped saying yes to everything. She nodded. I noticed. Silence settled again. Then she laughed quietly. You know what's embarrassing? What? I genuinely believed I was the nice one. The honesty surprised me. I wasn't. I was just good at looking nice. Those words stayed with me because they explained so much. I can't change what I did. She stood slowly.
But.
She hesitated. I'm trying to stop doing it. I don't expect you to trust me. I wouldn't. She took a slow breath. Wanted you to know I finally understood. She walked away before I could answer. I watched until she disappeared behind the science block. I didn't know whether she'd truly change. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. That decision belonged to her now, just as mine belonged to me. Graduation arrived far sooner than either of us expected. Students laughed. Parents took hundreds of photographs. Teachers pretended not to cry. I stood with Hannah, Liam, and the others we'd somehow become. Not because fate had planned it. Because I'd finally made room for people who wanted to be in my life. Across the hall, I noticed Cassie talking quietly with a different group of students. She caught my eye. She smiled. A small one. I returned it. Nothing more. Nothing less. Some friendships weren't meant to be repaired. Some were simply meant to end without bitterness. That evening, after the ceremony, I returned home and opened the drawer beside my desk. The blue protractor case still rested exactly where I'd left it. The tiny padlock reflected the light from my bedroom window. I unlocked it, for the first time since coming back. Inside lay the same ruler, the same compass, the same protractor. Everything exactly as it should have been. I ran my fingers across the empty compartment where Ethan's flash drive had once been hidden. It was strange. In my first life, I'd believed this little plastic case had ruined everything. Now I knew it hadn't. The case had never been the problem. Neither had the zipper. The problem had been believing that other people always knew better than I did. That saying no made me selfish. That protecting what mattered made me difficult. It didn't. Sometimes the bravest thing a person could do wasn't taking a risk. Sometimes it was refusing to let someone else make the decision for them. I closed the case gently. This time, I didn't lock it. I didn't need to anymore. The lesson had never been about keeping everyone else out. It had been about finally trusting myself enough to decide who I let in. As I placed it back into the drawer, I realized something that made me smile. In my first life, I had been reborn because I died. In this one, I had been reborn the moment I learned that one quiet word,
No,
could save an entire future.